be irulau. Watch your back, a trench is gonna get you. Watch your back, a trench is gonna get you. Watch your back,
Oh, there's a giant here. It's a coming from the Ugalde. Gotta wash those red hands. It's the crimes of the Badlands. It's the crimes of the Badlands.
Hello there, everybody.
Hello, Douglas.
Hi, Julie. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Very good, yes.
Good. The rain's back here in the Basque Country.
It's finally cold.
Yeah, it is cold. I had to bust out the scarf tonight.
Me and the old ladies of Bilbao, we like the cold.
Yeah,
I
do like me some summer, but
the green mountains.
I do like green mountains.
Cozy indoors. Time for red wine.
True. Time for red wine. That's right. That's when it tastes best, doesn't it?
Today we're having Ramon de Bilbao.
Yeah.
A red wine.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite well known.
Mm-hmm.
Oops, sorry there.
It's very nice.
Yeah, and it's from Rioja region. We weren't sure if it was Basque Country or Spain because the region of the wine covers both nations.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, even though it's called Ramon de Bilbao, and Bilbao is where we are, it's actually in the Spanish part. And it's got a connection to the Basque Country, which was something we were going to mention again, right?
This podcast.
Yeah, it's about crimes.
Yeah, so we are just discussing crimes that have to do with the Basque Country or Basque people, and it could be the whole diaspora.
Indeed, any tenuous connection.
Any tenuous connection works for us. Last names that have Basque surnames.
Yep.
Could take place in far-reaching lands around the world.
Yeah. So today you've prepared a story, I believe.
I have. Yes, I have. Let's see. This is a pretty sad one.
Oh.
So this one is, I titled it "The Tragedy at the School in Ortuella."
Oh man, children, we're not getting worse. We're not getting better. Poor kids.
I know.
I hope it was an accident.
This week I tried. I wanted to get away from murder, because it can be pretty tedious to hear about all the time. But don't worry, Douglas. This story I'm about to tell you is no less tragic and horrific.
Okay.
So I would even assert that this event was harder for those involved, considering there was no one person they could blame.
Oh.
For the grief and the disbelief that something so horrible could befall a community.
Oh.
Yeah.
This is looking deep and profound.
Yeah. So a warning to our listeners, this story involves the death of children, and some listeners may find this to be too disturbing. So be mindful of this going forward. Or skip it if that's something that you find too disturbing.
Indeed. It's a very sensitive topic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to recount the story, like I said, of the tragedy at the Marcelino Ugalde school in Ortuella.
Okay.
I'd like to thank my friend Anna for making this story suggestion. Anna of Anna and Ander.
Oh, yes, of course.
So shout out to Anna and Ander if you're listening
Anna.
Right now.
Thank you for the
Thanks
story.
for the suggestion, yeah.
If I'm too traumatized, I know who to blame.
Who to talk to. And another note that I'd like to make is that if I go off track a few times in this story to give our listeners some insight into the workings and history of some of the elements in the story, just stick with me, okay? Because I did go down a lot of
rabbit holes.
Yeah.
Sounds fun.
Okay, so here's a little history on Ortuella.
Mm.
Ortuella is a town and municipality located here in Bizkaia. It now makes up part of Greater Bilbao.
I just looked it up to check exactly where it was.
You had to get yourself oriented.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah, it's towards the greater, the super port of
the
Bilbao.
Estuary. Yep.
Mm-hmm, but just kind of inland a little bit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right along the hills. Yep.
It sounds idyllic and beautiful.
Mm-hmm. It is now part of Greater Bilbao, but until the beginning of the 19th century, it was integrated into the valley of Somorrostro and part of the municipality of Santurce.
Okay.
Which is where the big port is.
Yeah.
So it was part of the municipality of Santurce, and in fact, it was previously called Santurce Ortuella.
Oh, interesting.
So, as you may recall, we spoke of the Somorrostro mines in our episode about Juan Diaz de Garallo, the Sacamantecas.
It's true, yeah.
The boogeyman of Vitoria Gasteiz.
Yeah, he went there to work. He barely stayed there, right?
He wasn't there very long, but he did go there to work. Yeah. And actually, I wanted to give a shout out to Tom, who had recommended that story to me. I have to remember to thank people who have suggested different stories.
Belated thank you, Tom.
So yeah, thanks, Tom. We know you're out there listening. Tom's also our producer, engineer of our little song.
Yeah. So
yeah. Hey, Tom.
You'll recognize his name from the
credits.
thank yous. Yeah, exactly.
So that is Tom. So yeah, like I said, in that story about Garallo, he skipped town to lie low after he paid that woman off that he had attacked. And so he went there to work in the mines, and the towns in this area have a very long history of mining.
Yeah.
So it was at the height of the mining boom in the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century when the population of Ortuella significantly increased, and then the two municipalities separated and became simply Santurce and Ortuella. The population of Ortuella at the time of this incident was around 9,000 people.
Okay.
Today it's around 7,500.
Okay.
So it's not a big community, but it's not small.
Yeah.
Either. I mean, it's a small town.
What sort of year are we talking about when this happened?
This happened in 1980.
80. Oh,
yeah.
Some time ago.
Yeah.
Modern times, but quite some time ago.
40 years ago. So I'm sure it had at the time and still has today like a small town feel to it. I've been to Santurce, but I've never been to Ortuella. Have you ever been?
Doesn't ring a bell. I'm wondering if it's where one of my ex's brothers live, and it's down that way. And I'm afraid I don't remember exactly where. But yeah, the area has definitely got that big mountain that kind of overshadows you, which has always been a iron ore source mine, and it's even an attraction because of the weird shapes of leftover rocks around, and it's a cool looking area. It's fun, but yeah, very, very hardworking.
Maybe one day we'll all the crew, our 3-person team, go out there for a little field trip.
It sounds fun. Yeah, we're planning some field trips. We're gonna.
Yeah, we have. We got to go see these places we talk about.
Instagrams and something like that.
Yeah. Okay, so here's what I'll put in my 1-sentence synopsis, okay? Small town suffers huge loss in the wake of an avoidable tragedy that can only be blamed on penny pinching.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Health and safety crime, huh?
Yeah. On October 23rd, 1980, the public school Marcelino Ugalde served the community of Ortuella. On this day, 870 students were attending class in this 3-story building. In addition, there were, of course, the teachers of all these students and other staff that make up the running of the school. The school is located between 2 neighborhoods, Ganguren and Mendialde. We know Mendi means mountain.
It is.
And Alde, I think you told me, means place?
It's kind of side, like next to the mountain.
Side.
Or the side of the mountain.
Okay. I gotta
well
remember
done.
that. See, I'm trying to learn my Euskera.
Doing great.
Okay, so these neighborhoods were populated primarily with working class folk, many of which were from other parts of Spain. And when the population exploded during the expansion of the iron mining around the turn of the 20th century, that's what, there was a huge influx of people from all over the rest of the country and parts of the Basque Country for work.
It's interesting. Just when you're saying that, it's a well-known fact when you live in Bilbao that the left, we call it the left side of the river, that side. If you look at it from the point of the river flowing down, it's the left side, and that's known as the very working class side. And it's funny, I never related it to the fact that that's where the mines were. That's why they all went to the left-hand side.
That's very true.
It was because the mines were there.
Yeah, the other side's all the posh neighborhoods, like in Getxo.
Yeah, the owners of the mines.
That's bastards.
Anyways, okay, we know who we're talking about.
Yeah. So at its peak, right around the end of the 19th century, this area was producing more than 5 million tons of phosphorus-free iron ore, the majority of which was shipped to Great Britain, where it was used in steel manufacturing during the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, and that's a very kind of very important part of Bilbao's development, in the sense that not only did they have this export, but they also, because the ships were empty when they got to the UK, they would come back with coal, which is how they started smelting iron here in the Basque Country. And that's how they actually industrialized, was both selling the iron ore and then bringing back the coal from the UK and smelting and eventually shipbuilding here as well. So it's all kind of in the history.
Yeah. So that's the little history of the town.
Nice.
Kind of give you a background.
We're situated.
Yeah. So one side of the school building sat up against the hillside and the surrounding fields.
As the name of the neighborhood says.
Mendialde, yes.
Cute.
And it was kind of uphill from the town. The other side of the school was facing the very neighborhoods that it served, right? Okay. So it's pretty classic Basque school, you know, like in these smaller towns, right? There's always like the school kind of at the top of the hill, and there's like fields and stuff behind it, but then there's all the neighborhoods around it that
they'll choose a cheaper piece of land on the outskirts, and
to build a big enough building.
Beautiful green mountains everywhere.
The building itself was only 8 years old, with a capacity for 1,300 students, and it was divided into 28 classrooms.
Okay.
This day in October was like any other. At around noon, the students had just returned to their classes after their morning break. So for all of our listeners outside of the Basque Country or Spain in general, the rumors are true. The timetables are off by a few hours here compared to everybody else, right? Like, so they came back from their morning break at noon. Whereas like in the US, I would have been going to lunch at noon, right?
I mean,
for them here, they go to lunch at 2.
Okay, that's what you mean.
Yeah.
We later. Okay. I was confused.
Eat later. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I barely went to school, so I'm not sure what you're talking about there.
so you didn't have a timetable that you adhered to?
I was homeschooled till 14, and then in Brazil, there's morning school, there's afternoon school, and there's evening school. So, sometimes people have to work, like kids have to work. So, but that's why there are night schools and afternoon schools, in case you're working in the morning and you have to go to school.
So would your school day be only like a few hours?
So I think morning was something like 6-ish to 12.
6 a.m.
Yeah, that was morning. And then afternoon was like say 12:30 till 5:36-ish. And then evening would be 6-ish to like 11:30 at night.
Damn. Well, that's crazy. I didn't know you went to evening school.
Huh.
Yeah. Okay, so meanwhile, down in the kitchen of the school, which was located in the basement, city maintenance worker and plumber, 52-year-old Francisco Contreras, was called in to look into an issue the school was having with the heating boiler.
Okay.
I keep wanting to say broiler, so if I say broiler, just correct me.
We're not cooking.
Boiler, yeah. We're not like putting anything in the oven. Okay, so the boiler was located below the kitchen in a space that ran, the entire length of the school and housed all of like the drainage, piping, electrical wiring, all the mechanics that you'd find under a building, right?
So underneath, okay, like a
it was kind of like under, like a sub basement below the basement.
Okay.
Because I think the kitchen was in the basement.
Okay.
According to the documentary that I watched on this, and from what was reported later, some of the staff had been complaining about a terrible odor in the school. And it was surmised that the odor was resulting from an issue with the septic tanks. Okay. So it seems like they called him there was the issue with the heating boiler. So let's leave it at that. He came in and, had to go look at the problem, and the problem would require that Mr. Contreras would do some welding in order to resolve it. So, as I said, it was just before noon. Classes had just resumed after their morning break when a huge explosion rocked the entire school.
Oh my gosh.
The explosion was felt throughout the entire school. It shook everything, shattering windows on all floors, jarring blackboards off of the walls, and shifting all of the desks and furniture in the building.
Wow.
The explosion had emanated from the basement of the building and could be heard from over 6 kilometers away.
Oh my gosh.
One whole side of the building at the ground level was blown away, and all of the classrooms that were on the ground floor completely collapsed into the basement, dragging down with it 128 people.
Oh.
Yeah. 80 to 90 of which were the youngest little students.
Oh.
So it was the 5 to 6-year-olds in the 3 classrooms on the ground floor, which were like the first year primary EGB course.
Okay, I've heard that. I don't. What is EGB again?
Well, I'm about to tell you because I
happy.
also had to look into that.
Because the thing is,
And that'll give us a little break from this tragedy for a second.
yeah,
To go into the school system here.
every school system is so different.
Yeah.
And I was barely in any school system, so.
Well, I'm actually really glad you asked because I
Thank you.
was like, somebody might ask me about this and I'm going to have to know.
I was afraid you were going to
So
count
I
on
looked
me
into
for that.
it.
Thank you, Julie.
Okay, so EGB stands for Educación General Básico. So general basic education.
Okay.
So at that time, schooling for all children was free and compulsory until the age of 14.
Mm-hmm.
It has since been changed. And today, basic compulsory education consists of primary education until about age 12, and then secondary education, now called ESO.
Mm-hmm.
So it's no longer called EGB. It doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
Which ESO is obligatory secondary education.
Okay. Does that finish at 14 as well?
No, now that is that now requires that basic education is until the age of 16.
Okay.
So here's an extra little insight into the educational system. At the time of this tragedy in 1980, Spain's education system was based entirely on the LGE, which I think stands for General Law of Education.
Okay.
So Ley General
It makes sense.
Educativo or Educación.
De educación, probably.
Educación, which was from 1970 until 1984. Often referred to as the Villar-Palasi Law, after the Minister of Education and Science at the time, José Luis Villar-Palasi.
Mm-hmm.
This law was the Franco government's attempt to modernize Spain's public education system.
Mm-hmm.
And although it's been added to and modified since the return of democracy, and with the establishment of the 1978 Spanish Constitution post-Franco's death in 1975, the structure it established was still nearly completely intact well into the 1980s.
Okay.
So that's where the EGB, I think that's
Yes.
what
When
they
that
were
died.
still functioning under at the time of this. So there you go. All right. Well, should we take a little break before we get back to the really horrible story?
Yes.
Okay. Let's
Little
take a break and
for
drink a
everybody.
little more wine.
Oy, 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 oy. See you soon.
Okay, bye. We're back.
We're back. Little time for a special effect. Nice.
Oh, now you're on the beer. No more wine for Douglas.
Clang, clang. I mean, it's delicious, but, I just like a taste of it.
Mm-hmm. It's very refreshing.
Mm.
Okay, so back to our horrendous story.
Yes.
So in this part of the episode, I'm going to be going into testimonials from people. And so there might be descriptions in here that are disturbing. So if that's too much for you, then maybe you should move on or skip ahead. But Douglas, you don't have that luxury. So
No.
you just have to sit here and take it.
I'm here.
Okay.
I mean, I'm easier if it's not with images. If it's with images,
Yeah.
I can't escape it.
Yeah.
My imagination, I think I can deal with it. Let's give it a try.
All right. Here we go.
So the school explodes.
Yep.
It's kind of, I'm guessing it's some kind of gas. I mean, this is not spoiling any part of the story, I think.
Well, it's unknown at this point,
Yes.
right?
But
Why it exploded.
there was an explosion, and there was a plumber that he had some kind of soldering.
like a
flame.
welding. Yeah.
Welding, that's what
Well,
I
a guy
meant.
came in to fix the boiler, and he had to
Boom.
do some welding. So, as I said, the entire ground floor of the building had collapsed into the basement, along with all of the little babies in the first year primary
Oh
classes.
my gosh.
So all the 5 and 6-year-olds.
My gosh.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like I'm gonna. I always say this, but that's what you get with dictatorships that don't give a fuck about their people. They just build these crappy buildings and schools, and they're not accountable for anything. And in a way, I mean, I'm not this.
Yeah, I guess it would have been built if it was 8 years old. It would have been built during Franco's.
Yeah,
he was still alive.
Yeah, so just substandard everything, unfortunately.
So, as this was such an enormous explosion that couldn't be missed by anyone in the surrounding area, the first ones to respond were, of course, the neighbors.
Okay.
And
wow.
Of the school and and its surroundings.
Yeah, makes sense.
So, one witness was Jose Lorenzo Diego, who was working in a fish market located just 10 meters from the school.
Wow.
He recounted, quote, "I heard the explosion, which tore the door off of the shop and threw me to the ground. As soon as I recovered, I looked out and saw what was happening at the school, where I had 3 grandchildren.
Oh my gosh.
I ran out there. There were devastating screams, the voices of the wounded on the one hand, and the cries of the children on the first and second floors, who jumped out of the windows and ran towards the neighboring fields.
Oh my gosh.
They were coming and going without knowing what to do. Upon arrival, I found 4 or 5 other men who had begun to extract the children from the rubble. I wanted to look for my grandchildren, but first I helped to get 3 children out. They were dead. Then I saw one of my granddaughters, and she, along with her mother, found the other 2 kids in the field above the school."
Oh my gosh.
End quote. So his grandkids, luckily survived.
Yeah, it's still traumatizing enough. That's horrible.
Totally. Another witness and first responder was unemployed worker Pedro Callejo. He said that of the day, quote, "I was taking a walk with my son who was not yet going to school by the field that's just above the school. It so happens that I was looking towards the school and saw everything. That is, the glass shattering and pieces of the wall that jumped, the collapse of the wall on the left of the building. I left my child with a lady and ran down to help. I helped get a teacher out who was half dead, busted. There were mutilated children without heads or with one arm, something terrible. We got about 15 or more out before the ambulances arrived, leaving them under the shed opposite the entrance. The most terrible thing was the screams and the cries of the children, and later of the mothers who were arriving." End quote.
Wow.
Right. So the shed he's referring to is like a huge covered area over like a patio where the kids can play at recess and not get wet. This is pretty common to see at schools and playgrounds here.
Yeah, it's a very
quite
wet
rainy
region. Yeah.
So this covered area is where many of the perished victims were laid while waiting for official responders to arrive.
Yeah, and that's horrible.
I know. Jaime Rodriguez Parejas, an afternoon shift worker at the Babcock and Wilcox Company, was working in a small orchard adjoining the school when, around 10 minutes to 12, he heard the explosion. Jaime, father of 2 boys and 1 girl, all 3 students at the school, ran to the affected area of the building, and according to him, found himself in a Dante-esque spectacle.
Absolutely.
Quote, "The children were thrown out of the windows while the remains of others appeared on the front of the building." End quote.
Oh man, that's
intense. It's really terrible. I know.
Yeah, horrible.
But these are like witness accounts. This is what they saw and we're dealing with.
Yeah.
3 other people, residents of the apartment building located in front of the school, which was also affected by the blast's expansive wave, began together with Jaime Rodriguez the task of clearing debris. The group was joined shortly after by some teachers from the classrooms on the first floor, where some of the children were also injured, although not seriously, and they were all joined by other residents of the area. So within minutes, the community immediately mobilized to assist the injured and to search for survivors in the wake of the explosion, including the mayor of Ortuella, Manuel Fernandez Ramos. And it made a note in the paper that he was a socialist. Just thought that was kind of funny. Well, Manuel Fernandez Ramos, a socialist.
Well, in the time, they're just coming out of dictatorships, so I guess
So that was like something to point out, right?
It's both reaffirming and also kind of new, right?
Yeah.
I'm kind of tearing up. I'm sorry.
I know. It's really sad. It's okay. I'm sorry.
Well, it's truth, and we have to hear it. I think it's such an important part of the history, and I think people maybe should talk more about it, right? Because it's very traumatic.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So the mayor arrived around noon. He arrived on the scene recalling, quote, "When I heard the explosion, I ran up the hill to the school. I saw upon arrival the most terrible scene of my life. Some children came out on foot, despite the fact that they were bleeding and mutilated. I went into autopilot. I began to help those who were already working among the rubble.
Yeah.
We took out 2 children. Suddenly I realized what I had to do was tell someone to ask for help.
Yeah.
So I went back down, found a phone, and raised the alarm." Asuncion Lausorena, who was 10 years old at the time, was on the first floor. And this is her quote. "The teacher had not come that day," she relates, "because she was going to have a baby and she had gone to the doctor. So a teacher came in to take over the class, and we convinced him to let us play. So we were pretending to be ballet dancers."
Oh, that's so cute.
Mm-hmm. "Suddenly there was a very loud explosion, which made the tables and glass jump. Some children were bleeding a lot, and we couldn't breathe. Almost everyone jumped out the window. I was going to go out, but the blackboard fell on me, and I was left alone. Then the teacher came back and took me out. Outside there were many dead children, and others were screaming." End quote.
Man, that's horrible.
I'm almost through with these testimonials. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I mean, we see so many disasters on TV, like water floods and earthquakes, and we don't get these testimonies anymore,
the
right?
details.
It's just a number these days.
It really is, yeah.
So
like traumatizing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also to understand that you kind of need to hear some testimonies, all right?
Yeah.
Because otherwise, it's just a number.
Right. Yeah. It's just like this many people died in the flooding, Yeah.
Yeah.
Or earthquakes and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Maria Teresa Ormaechea, teacher and director of the center, was also on the first floor in the second year primary EGP classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Her son was on the ground floor.
Wow.
In one of the classes for the little ones. So she recalled, quote, "I felt the explosion. I started pulling the children out of the window. Then I saw what had happened downstairs," end quote. Her nightmare, knowing that her son was somewhere within the affected area of the building, filled her with dread and panic. The uncertainty of his fate very much matched the turmoil that many were experiencing in the immediate aftermath.
Absolutely.
So according to the testimonies of those in the neighborhood, people weren't sure what had happened until the whole neighborhood went into a panic and everyone started heading up the hill to the school to help or check on their children. Because if you had children, they most certainly were at the school. It was the only school in town.
Yeah.
So
that's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, when you started saying that this guy was in a shop in a fish market, and then you said he had 3 grandchildren there. Of course, everybody has.
Knows some kid there. Yeah.
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 So, and what I was going to point out.
It's such a small place too,
Yeah. And I don't think people's minds would go there necessarily, but it is a time when ETA was.
I'll get there.
Was an active movement, and ETA is the independence movement, and they had lots of bombs. Mm-hmm. Of course, that was directed mostly toward politicians, but not only. So it's an ambiguous situation, It's not a war, but
so nobody knows what's happening, right? Yeah, you're just not sure.
Yeah,
what's happening.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. So once the alarm had been raised and emergency services had been called in, people from all over the area converged on the area to help out, including the workers from the local mines and factories, who, while still wearing their blue workwear, like,
Yeah,
because I guess that
of
was the
course.
standard wear.
Yeah, you're not going
of,
to change
like,
clothes.
the pullovers or the coveralls, I guess you call them. People that work in factories wear coveralls. Like,
I'll let you use
full
any word. I
like
think
a
they're all
full length
acceptable. Yeah.
outfit.
Monkey suit.
Monkey suit.
Anything you want to call it. I mean, it's beautiful that everybody
Yeah,
gets
like
together.
everybody went into action. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah. And that's, that's a beautiful thing of the Basque Country. I
Yeah,
think
the community. The
we
sense
see
of community
very often, yeah.
Yeah. So they, all these people came in from everywhere, all the factories and the mines, and they organized several rescue brigades. In the workers' unions, CCOO, which is Comisiones Obreras, or Workers' Commissions,
Mm-hmm.
and the UGT, Union General de Trabajadores, General Union of Workers,
Mm-hmm.
summoned the members of the left bank of the Nervion. So that's the left
region
bank you were
they're in.
talking to,
Yeah.
where the side of the river where all this happened. The Nervion is the estuary or the river that runs through Bilbao. They were able to summon all the members all along there by radio or by telephone to go to blood donation centers.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
so they were
of course.
organizing like blood donations. 200 volunteers from the Red Cross, along with nurses and doctors from Cruces Hospital and outpatient clinics in the mining area, provided first aid to the wounded. Workers from the factories on the left bank of the estuary were in charge of organizing traffic on the road from Santurce to Bilbao, leaving only one of the roads permanently clear, along which only ambulances could travel.
Wow.
So this is like a huge community effort.
Yeah, it's so organized.
And it came together like pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's surprising.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So the police and the fire brigade and other emergency responders arrived on the scene, which, according to some testimonies, it wasn't until around 1:45. So it took them a while to like get there. And maybe it's because it took a while for someone to actually call.
Yeah.
Right? Like to raise the alarm, because people just went straight to help.
Yeah.
And then didn't, like, oh crap, we got to call somebody to help us out here,
Yeah, you put the mayor's testimony in the right place, where you saw that he kind of reacted immediately.
He was like, I'm the one in charge here of
it's
this.
a small town.
Right.
Yeah. But then
my duty here is to like get some serious, get help here.
Yeah, it's incredible how those things have changed, because today, you couldn't have 5 minutes without somebody just calling on their own mobile, and
right.
Those times, you had to actually go to a physical
find
phone.
A phone. Yeah,
there weren't that many. They were expensive. It's crazy. It doesn't feel that long ago. I was born in 1980. It's a long time ago, but
yeah,
it was a very different kind of society, right? With pre-mobiles,
completely.
Just never mind the internet, etc.
So,
so it's
the
1
emergency
o'clock. There's
responder,
more
emergency responders relayed a similar reaction to coming upon the scene, saying it was absolutely horrific, like nothing they'd ever seen before in their line of work. In addition, the Guardia Civil, which we've mentioned a few times on our podcasts, which is the civil guard or the federal police agency.
It's federal, yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say it's like a National Guard, but there's another one called the Policía Nacional. So
yeah, I know. I never know what
too many police here.
And I don't know if federal is even the right word, but that's what I think of it, because of American. I would think of something that
it isn't.
Spans the whole country.
It
so
clearly isn't.
No, so I don't know.
Philosophy in the
this
sense.
is us, like, yeah.
A federation has equality between its members, and a kingdom, which is what we are, does not. There's clearly a king.
Okay.
And then there's the subject regions.
So this is the civil guard, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
And it's throughout the whole nation. So, in addition, the Guardia Civil had to try to get the citizens, the parents, teachers, neighbors, etc., that were searching in the rubble away from the building. As some of them were themselves becoming injured,
right,
pulling up rubble and stuff. Of course,
they're desperate. And
they were needing first aid themselves. And so then another concern was that all of the citizens around trying to help were putting themselves in danger as the upper floors of the school or one of the other lateral walls were in danger of collapsing at any minute.
Wow.
So a cordon had to be formed by the civil guard to try, and with great difficulty, to keep parents and neighbors away from the building. So, you wouldn't be thinking straight as a parent or neighbor. You'd be trying to get in and help and do what you could to find your children or whatever. So the rescue operation had to not only transport the wounded, but recover the dead and tend to the parents at the scene. Parents were summoned to the town hall around 2:00 to view the lists of the enrolled students in order to establish like a definitive account of victims. And there were so many victims that there weren't enough ambulances to transport the injured to the hospital, and therefore people were also transporting them to the hospital in private cars.
Of course, yeah.
Over 50 or so, of the 50 or so wounded victims that were pulled out and taken to hospital, about 10 to 11 of them later died of their injuries.
That's already a lot, but wasn't there almost 200 people in the school?
There was 870
800, oh my gosh.
Children.
Yeah.
Not including the teachers and staff.
Okay.
So the morgue, then, of course, everybody's like overwhelmed at the hospital too.
Yeah, morgue,
right?
hospitals,
Cruces,
everybody.
which is like the largest hospital in the area, which is in Baracaldo.
It's north of here. It's closer to them than it is to us.
Then like Basurto is closer to Bilbao center, but like, yeah. Cruces is the biggest one, I think. It's
kind of halfway from here to Ortuella, I think.
Yeah.
Pretty close to halfway. It's good for access for them, but yeah.
So they're overwhelmed.
Not much help.
And they had, in the documentary I watched, they had people talking about what it was like for them to be taking in all these patients and kids.
Yeah, crazy.
So the morgue at the hospital wasn't even large enough for all of the perished. And in the end, they had to establish a space, which is essentially like a large room, to accommodate all of those who had lost their lives. When it came time for family members to then identify their loved ones, it was yet another agonizing ordeal. Because we're talking about mostly young children.
Yeah.
And many of them have been disfigured because of the nature of the disaster. And, the victims either died from the explosion itself or from being crushed when the building collapsed. So the hospital staff had to, sedate many of the parents before asking them to identify their loved ones. And they further tried to lessen their trauma by having them only identify the clothing that the children were wearing that day.
That's a good move. I've never heard of that, but yeah, that sounds like the thing to do, especially with the scale of the problem. Yeah, that's incredible.
I mean, everyone involved in this tragedy was extremely affected by this event. And those who made up the rescue operation and the hospital staff testified that it was one of their worst days on the job.
Yeah.
And obviously the parents of the deceased were deeply grieving, but the whole community was touched by it because it was, like we were saying, such a small community and it traumatized everyone. And many of those community members would know.
Yeah. If they weren't
people affected, there would be
children,
nieces and nephews or grandchildren or
neighbors
or their friends' kids, they're friends of their kids. And
when it's divided by age, it's just a class. And so, it just affects everybody in the community. It's crazy.
So all told, 49 children died.
Wow.
And 3 adults.
That's a lot of people.
I know. And the 49 children made up most of the class of those first-year primary students, the 5 and 6-year-olds.
Yeah, that's a hard one.
So, including the son of the witness I mentioned earlier, Maria Teresa.
The director of the school.
Yeah. So from that class, only 4 children survived.
Wow. I mean, I guess it was close to the source of the explosion.
Well, it was the whole ground floor.
Right.
So that was the one that collapsed into the basement.
Okay.
So they just got crushed by rubble.
Man. Well, I mean...
Or the explosion was right there right? So,
Mhm.
because it occurred in the basement, which is right below their classroom,
Mhm.
which then collapsed the floor of the whole building.
Yeah. I'm just hoping we're going to have better building standards after this tragedy.
Yes, it
I'm
did
sorry.
change things.
I'm grasping.
I know, it
I'm
did change
grasping.
things.
Good. I'm happy.
Yeah.
For something.
So,
Not yet.
it essentially wiped out that whole generation of that age group.
That's
That like 95% of that generation,
yeah.
between 5 and 6 years old, was wiped out.
That is horrible.
Yeah. Among the adults whose lives were lost were 2 teachers and the school's cook, who was in the basement kitchen. 2 of the children's survivors were interviewed in the documentary that I watched, and they recounted how they managed to survive. One girl was at her teacher's desk showing her something she'd done, or was asking her a question when the explosion occurred. And she somehow ended up under the desk when it happened, which protected her from the collapse of the building.
Right.
She recalled how she was in and out of consciousness, but could hear the neighbors and parents digging in the rubble.
Wow.
And at one point, she could actually see her mother's skirt,
Oh, wow.
and which prompted her to like call out and alert
Wow.
the searchers to her location.
Wow. Such an intimate story at the same time. It's crazy. Eh?
And one of the photos that appeared in the newspapers, because of course it's all the same photos you'll see over and over again of the day.
It was the 80s. 2 people had cameras.
Right. So it's all the same photos.
Yeah.
So one of the photos that appeared in the newspapers from that day is her being carried out to her mother. The other survivor only remembers that right before the blast, they were in art class making things with Play-Doh. And he just happened to live because 2 huge slabs of concrete fell and landed like a tent over him.
Wow.
So he became pinned underneath them in the space that was created below it.
Some people are lucky.
Just lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unlucky to be an explosion, but still.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the day. So let's take a break and then we'll talk about what the aftermath. All right.
And we're back.
Okay, so the aftermath. All right. So a joint funeral was held for all of the victims. So they did a funeral for everyone at the same
I'm
time.
not sure how I feel about that. I mean, joint wedding, okay,
Well,
but
it was like a
funeral,
community thing.
I know.
It was something everybody went through. So it was like, I can get it. I get it, like in the sense that like
it does make sense.
everybody
But I'm
knew
not sure.
everyone was affected by it. And like, you know, even if it wasn't directly like a relation of yours that died, you probably knew the other kids that died somehow because they were friends of the child that you knew or the child that was part of your family. You know what I mean? So like, it was like,
yeah, I get it.
So they did a joint funeral. My
gut reaction is like, oh, you know, let's say I love my child. I just don't want them to get lost, you know, in the sea of things.
I don't think they would. I think it's like in mass, you know, it's like a grieving in mass. So yeah, well, like I'm saying, the outpouring of grief, for this community spread throughout the entire nation, like all of Spain.
Happy to hear. Well,
and the organizers anticipated an enormous turnout for any and all of these funerals that were going to be taking place for this tragedy.
I'm just troubled with your word nation there. Nation is not appropriate here. Let's just okay.
Well, I'll say
country,
that all of Spain, and the whole country of Spain.
Yeah, thank you.
So it was held in an industrial pavilion, which was used for shipbuilding at the time. So they had to use this huge space where more than 7,000 people attended this funeral.
Wow.
And there's footage of this funeral.
Wow.
And it's also just so astounding to see.
Was this in the documentary I imagine you watched?
Yeah.
Right? Like I might have heard that name, but I never realized the intensity of that tragedy.
Yeah.
Well, when you watched that, what were your thoughts that went through your head? Like, because Bilbao,
I mean, it's astounding to see when you see in the amount of coffins.
Right. Just in a row.
Yeah. It's just like crazy how many people died that day.
Yeah.
Children.
Yeah.
mostly, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very sad.
and everybody in the whole country was feeling that like everyone could relate in a way. You know
course.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Like losing a child like that.
Yeah. Classrooms, a community.
Yeah.
Intense.
Yeah. So, you know, and there's also like, I mean, because it was such a big story in the whole country that the Queen was seen, you know, there's footage of the Queen visiting the kids that had survived in the hospital, you know, so it was just like, it was like all over the press. It was all over everywhere. Sorry, it was just like everywhere.
At the same time, I'm happy they did it. At the same time, I feel there's this like use of those emotions, you know. But I think that you know, I would rather they come and pay their respects. That's the minimum they can do.
I think that's all anyone was doing at this time. So I mean, it just rocked everybody. Everybody was just shocked and like it was just an unfathomable, like tragedy that just, you know, you lose your kids where you think they should be safe at school and. Yeah, it just horrified everyone everywhere.
Of course.
So, how did this happen? Well, in the immediate aftermath, the rumor spread that it was a terrorist attack by ETA.
Right.
It was the 1980s after all, and things were popping off at the time. And I really honestly don't care to go into all the ins and outs of ETA at this point.
No, I mean, we've you know, just Google ETA. There's a Wikipedia page if you're interested.
Look into it,
an independence movement. I mean,
so this rumor spread, and it was even speculated upon in the press, and it stuck for a while until an actual formal investigation and criminal trial took place. So it turns out that the cause of the explosion, as you nailed it before, Douglas, was none other than a propane gas leak.
Yeah. Oh, so it was propane and not related to the sewage system, because I thought it could have been gas from the sewage system as well.
No, it was propane.
Okay. Because, you know, there's a lot of gas coming from...
Enough to cause that big of an explosion.
Oh, yeah.
I know that methane gas is pretty...
You can produce it from, like, cow shit. Like, there's...
Yeah, I know. That's, like, one of the biggest polluters, right? In the world today is methane gas from farts.
Yeah. But then there's an ambiguity there, because it is true that if you just leave a cow in the field, it will be farting and burping, and that's going to release CO2. But the fact is that the matter is that if you just collect its poo and put it in a vet, you're going to collect a lot of gas as well. And this is an industrial process. Some farms collect the poo, put it in a vet, and there's tons of gas that gets out there. You can run your whole farm on the methane that comes from just the hard solids. Exactly. I was trying to look for a better word.
Cow shit. Come on. Or bullshit.
Yeah. So the live animal, when it comes out, it's still producing the CO2. So, you know, if you have bad piping, you can definitely accumulate a lot of gas.
I'm like now having like flashbacks of hearing stories about how there have been explosions or something from methane.
Yes,
from
farms.
Somebody farting or from cows farting or something. I cannot right now go into my files into my brain and remember the story that I heard, but
there's a number of cases.
I have heard of that. Yeah,
it's true.
But anyway, don't hold me to that, please. Honestly, it's something that like one of those pieces of news that you take in at some point and then you
took half the information in.
Right, took half in and then a fourth of that stayed.
So. We're good. But anyway, we all know gas explodes if you present it to fire.
So this is propane, though. All right, let's stick to the propane.
It's a kind of gas.
All right. So I'm gonna do my best in explaining how this occurred. So stick with me, because it's about to get technical, and so keep holding on to that chapella, Douglas.
Boom, boom, boom. Holding.
Okay, so first of all, there was no one person to blame for what happened that day. Yet it was an accumulation of many factors. Poorly completed construction jobs, standardized building plans, and cost-saving measures.
Are we saying lack of standardized? Or
no, standardized building plans was one of the issues. So as you recall, the
So
school,
bad standards
and
in
as
the
you
end.
recall that like they had called in that city maintenance worker, the plumber,
Yes.
Mr. Contreras,
Well
to
remembered.
tend to an issue with the school's boiler,
Mhm.
and his presence that day also played a part in what happened. So we'll get back to him later. Okay. All right. So, all right, here we go. This is the homework I had to do for this episode, which made it a really hard. I had to do homework and studying and stuff and trying to wrap my head around things. Because this stuff, I don't really care about that much. So anyway.
I mean, next time, don't worry about the technical
No, because
details.
if I have questions about it, then I know that other people might have questions about it. So if I'm like, wait, what? Then I know that I better figure out the answer to that. So then I have to go find the answer to that.
Right.
So
fair enough. Thank you for the effort.
So here we go. This is the best of my ability. So underneath the school, underground ran various piping systems, right? Electrical and propane.
Oh, that's
So
already sounding terrible.
They could be like propane pipes that, fed the whole community, and electrical systems that fed the community and or the like the railway that was nearby, right? So there was just a lot of like piping. Right? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So firstly, to address the issue of the poorly completed construction jobs that I mentioned. So apparently the electrical piping and wiring that ran under the school were not properly encased in cement when they were installed. So this is required because of the nature of electrical current, right? Yeah. It's like positive and negative running back and forth.
Well, there's sparks if there's a bad connection.
Well, they have to go back and forth and then hit I don't know. See, this is the shit I read about, and now I can't explain.
I think the issue is there's a possibility of sparks which could ignite gas. I think in the end of the day, that's what we're...
No.
No? Okay.
That's not what happened.
Okay. No, okay. So I think that's a danger.
Okay. So so they weren't properly encased, and if it's properly encased in the cement like it should be, then it would prevent the electrical current from escaping that area and therefore corroding other metal piping in the area or the vicinity of that electrical current.
Okay, I'm gonna just careful. I don't think electrical current corrodes anything, but
it does. There's a name for it.
Okay,
which I'm gonna get to.
Wow, interesting, learning.
So as this can be an issue, by law at the time, all industrial infrastructure had to be built with what is called cathodic protection in all metal piping. So, like I said, I had to look into all this just because I don't know shit about this stuff.
You can see even I was trumped, so.
Yeah. So the propane lines were required to have this type of protection in the piping to protect the metals used in the pipeline against what's called electrolysis.
Electrolysis, yeah.
Which is the corrosion of metals by electrical current. Okay, are you still with me?
I am. I didn't know what that meant but this is very fascinating.
What you don't know what meant?
Electrolysis.
That's what it's called, is when those, I guess when the...
Yeah, no, you said it was a corrosion of metal through electricity, which I didn't know.
Like it's hitting against it so often that it just corrodes the metal, right?
That makes sense, yeah. That makes sense.
So now let's talk about the school's design. Okay, so when we get to the school's design and the cost-saving measures that played a part, at the time the building was constructed, it was using a standardized design, which was in common use throughout the country. So this is one way that they would save money, by just adopting a design that was like a standardized. This is a public school.
Yeah,
building,
classic
right?
dictatorship. Don't think whether
just
it's a rainy
adopt
region,
this architectural design, and then use that to
region.
Build
just build them all the same.
So in the case of Marcelino Ugalde, which was built on a hillside, it meant that a huge basement was built underground. Which in other areas, if it was built on flat terrain, it would have been built on as the first floor or the ground floor of a building. But here, because it was on a hillside, the foundation was not adapted to be, because it was a basement.
Yeah, and they decided to put it in a basement.
Yeah. So that ground floor became the basement, right? And And at the time, it wasn't required for non-industrial buildings to have cathodic protection, this protection that they use to prevent electrolysis on its propane lines. And when they built the school, they opted out of including this protection because it was costly.
Okay.
So the lines that ran under the school became corroded from electrolysis, causing the perforations in a few sections of the propane line, which resulted in a leak. So now normally the leak would just go into the ground and not cause any immediate problems. But because propane is heavier than air, it naturally goes in the direction of least resistance and into low-lying areas.
Oh, I thought it would float higher. That's
No,
so
it's
weird,
actually
right?
heavier, I guess.
Wow. Interesting.
So the propane in this case went through the ground because it was underground where the lines were. And it entered into the school through a hole in the electrical tubing that led into the basement of the school. So there was like a hole in the electrical tubing, and then the propane went into that hole, and then it led into the school via that tubing.
It's another tube inside the school, though, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it got into the tubing that was in the electrical tubing that was for the school, right? So it's heavy, so it didn't go anywhere once it entered.
Stayed in the basement.
Just stayed in the basement.
Right.
Yeah, it just all collected into the basement.
Right, accumulating.
And the basement itself extended the entire length of the school. So it was just like filling that whole basement with propane.
Wow.
Okay, so I can see you're following me. Good.
I mean,
I'm hoping I'm explaining this well enough.
Just to link up with other stories, we had a mini crime time with a miner who died in an explosion, and it sounds like another case where more sort of canaries. We should be walking around with canaries.
I know, there should be canaries everywhere or something.
Install a canary in our phone, Apple. Come on.
So you'd think if there was so much propane collecting in the basement of a building, someone would notice, right?
Well, I actually know that the smell of propane is added post. It's actually a thing we do.
Exactly.
By itself, it's not.
Right?
It's
propane
odorless.
Gas itself is odorless.
Yeah.
However, when used for domestic purposes, a substance is added to make it smell really fucking bad. So that you can detect leaks.
And I've detected it a few times in my life.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a strong, clear smell for me.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just
well, lucky you that you detected it. Huh?
I mean, in Latin America, it's very common to have, I guess we call it propane. I never knew it until today, but like the propane gas, you just have to connect it manually every time you change it. So, these things leak. And quite a few times I was like, you didn't close it properly.
Yeah, no. And that's why they add this smell.
And that did have smell, though.
Because of the danger of
I
it,
had
right?
that advantage, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
I thought
it's been speculated that as the gas passed through the ground before entering that tubing that led into the basement, it passed through the clay and the earth, which acted as a filter, causing it to lose some of that odor.
Oh, right.
However, post-explosion, it was said that some of the school staff had complained about an unpleasant smell, and it was written off as a septic problem.
They were maybe not even used to the fact that was the smell of gas at the time, because it seems like it would be a new introduction, right? I was like, when did they start doing that? Because I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So let's talk about our plumber and his role in all this. Mr. Contreras was called in to address an issue with the school. Oh, sorry, that the school was having with the boiler. I almost called it broiler.
You made it.
With the boiler located in none other than the basement.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
I think it was below, from what I've gathered from the reenactments I saw in the documentary, it seems as though there was like the basement where the kitchen and stuff was. And then there was a lower kind of like crawl space type basement below that where all the piping and everything was.
Okay.
That's what it seemed to look like. Like they had to access the lower below the kitchen. So all this propane's collecting in that area, right? Over time. And even more unfortunate was the fact that he'd have to do some welding.
Yeah.
So it was when he proceeded to light the blowtorch or the whatever the torch or whatever he had to use to do welding, it sparked the explosion.
Yeah.
He miraculously survived.
No way. Oh my gosh. What the F?
Yes. One explanation is that the explosion caused an air current pushing the gas to the other side of the room and igniting in front of him.
Wow.
Like blowing him backwards and away from the fire.
Yeah.
So,
Physics.
So, yeah.
Crazy, huh?
So you might be thinking that. What a lucky guy. No.
Okay.
No. Of course, his presence at the school that day and being the unwitting, catalyst for the explosion made him, the scapegoat for the event.
I mean, it's clearly not his fault.
For some people. Yeah, I know, but of course he didn't escape not being blamed, right? So this poor man suffered from harassment.
Really?
He had his car set on fire. He was beat up a few times.
I mean, the whole community is traumatized, but...
I know, you have to look for somebody, right?
I mean, we also need some evidence first.
Yeah, it's natural for somebody to, find someone to blame, right?
Well, yes, natural, not justifiable. Yeah, okay.
Well, natural in the sense that,
sure,
people have a lot of grief and they just don't know what to do with it, right? So,
yeah.
But, but this is considering the fact that he had a daughter that was in the school at the time.
Oh my
He had a
gosh.
9-year-old daughter that was attending school at the time. So I mean, it's not like...
That's enough reason not to do anything to him.
I know, right? He's also...
Clearly.
Everyone's affected, right?
Clearly,
so, anyway. And then, and then they went on to speculate that, what if he had come later that afternoon, or if he'd come a week later, or even a month later, how much propane would have been had collected.
Makes sense.
At that
Could have been way more.
Way more, and caused even more.
Yeah, it's actually true. Wow. Yeah.
A bigger explosion, Maybe we should take a break because it's...
Let's do that. Yes.
And then we'll get into the trial and stuff. Okay, let's take a break.
See you in a second.
All right.
Hello, everybody.
Okay, so that's what happened. It was a propane leak. In the end, there was an investigation and a trial, and it was decided that there was no one person responsible for the commission of a criminal act, if you will. It was ruled if one were to be blamed, it was decided that it was to be the state educational system, as they had not exercised all due diligence to ensure that the state of the pipes would be such that there would be no risk of leaks, and therefore not allowing the gas to accumulate as it did. Okay. So the state did take civil responsibility. And it compensated the families of the victims.
Oh, wow. I'm happy to hear that. Wow.
So for each child's death, the family was paid 2 million pesetas.
Yeah. Was that 6,000 per million? 12,000?
In the doc I watched when it aired, the time that it aired, and I don't know what year it aired because I didn't look into it. They had worked out that the sum would be equivalent to 6 to 7 million pesetas, counting for inflation.
Oh.
So what do you think that is in euros today? I'm going to let you try to decide. 6 to 7 million pesetas would be in euros?
It's actually a coincidence in life that pesetas and yen are pretty much equivalent.
Oh, okay. So maybe you can work it out.
So 2 million, I think, would be 12,000 euros.
Okay, and then counting for inflation,
so
which would bring it up to 6 to 7 million pesetas.
72? No. What did I do? Did I skip a number of numbers? 36, 40.
It's really clear
42,
that neither of us are very good.
42,000 euros is my answer. Yes.
That's a pretty good estimate.
Thank you.
So 6 to 7 million pesetas today is between 36 to 42 million, or 32 to 42,000 euros.
Toma, as they would say here.
High five.
Boom. Okay.
Way to nail it. Wow, that was pretty good. That was the good math. So, That's really actually not that much. 36,000, 42,000.
Absolutely not. Not for losing a child.
Yeah.
Of course.
Can't put a price on that, right?
No, never. I'm happy something was done.
Yeah. And in addition to that, the only silver lining, if there is one, it might be that legislation was passed at this time as a result of this tragedy.
Good.
Demanding that all propane piping had to include cathodic protection to prevent erosion and leaks.
Good. Excellent.
So, before it was only for industrial facilities, right? So now it was for any and all
good
infrastructures.
Good. Well, that's unfortunately how we advance with standards. We have to wait for tragedies.
Something has to happen in order for something to change, right?
And we fix it.
Yeah. After this happened in October of 1980, the school didn't commence in Ortuella until almost the end of the course. And even then, all of the students were divided and sent to various locations in town to attend class while the school was being rebuilt. Some went to churches or even the priest's house, some said, for class.
Right.
In order to accommodate everyone, it was commonplace to have like 2 hours of class a day, and then they would leave to allow for another set of students to come in for their 2 hours of class. So that's how it went for a while. So according to those interviews who survived, it wasn't until they were able to reincorporate all of the students into some prefabricated buildings that functioned as a school building that the real loss of so many children was felt.
Right.
So like for a time they were just all kind of separated and sent to different places to take, to do school. And it wasn't until they all kind of came back together that they were like, realized that like, oh my God, there's like so many kids gone.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that hits me in a sort of indirect way when you mention that part is, oops, we're sixth year, there's a year that's not there, whatever that year would
year.
Be. It just
the whole primary.
There was no class for them. Well, I guess 2 kids survived.
4.
Sorry, 4. It was that's not enough for a class, but
no,
that's really when it hits home, right?
Another interesting fact that was mentioned in the documentary, it was by like a sociologist who said that as part of this aftermath, the birth rate in Ortuella practically doubled in the year 1981. So the year after.
Interesting.
So it went from 154 births to 324 births.
Wow.
And then the year after that, it went back to 160.
Wow.
So it went back to kind of like what it was normally.
How interesting.
Yeah.
I would never have guessed that direction. I would have maybe guessed the opposite,
Yeah.
Out of trauma. But hey, human resilience is incredible.
Yeah. So that was the trial and everything and like kind of the aftermath. So today there stands a monument as a memorial to all those who lost their lives that terrible day. It's called La Rosa Truncada, or the Truncated Rose. I had to look up what truncated meant, but I'm going to ask you, Douglas, do you know what that means?
I would imagine it's usually referring to a plant that hasn't had the option to grow perfectly and is just struggled for water, struggled for everything, and it's just very subpar.
You're pretty close. So it means shortened by or as if having a part cut off or cut short.
Almost like a bonsai.
Just pretty fitting, right?
Yeah.
To be cut short. Their lives were cut short. Right?
Absolutely.
Inscribed at the base of the monument is the following. De los niños de España a los niños de Ortuella por la catástrofe ocurrida en el Colegio Marcelino Ugalde 23 de octubre 1980. Okay, so that means from the children of Spain to the children of Ortuella for the catastrophe that occurred at the school Marcelino Ugalde on the 23rd of October 1980. And I looked on Google Maps to see if I could find the monument, and I found it.
Oh, nice.
I went to the street view and everything. It can be found like at what they said was like 2 Minero Iribidea.
So it's downtown, easy to find.
Yeah, it's pretty. I think it's pretty prominent, and I think every year, what I gathered, because I saw a couple of like news footage clips, was, well, I saw the one that was like the 40 years after the tragedy, but it seems like every year they do like they put
some
white roses on the
ceremonies.
memorial
Oh, that's
to
nice.
commemorate the amount, like a white rose for for each one of the victims.
That's very sweet. With the name of the monument as a truncated rose and the rose. That's very sweet.
Yeah.
I like that gesture.
In addition to that, in the town cemetery, you can find another memorial, which is called the Wall of Pain. That's like a direct translation, El Muro de Dolor, right?
Yeah.
And I believe it holds all of the tombs.
The
whole wall is all of the tombs of the victims of the tragedy. So it's like sheer size of it, like captures really the magnitude of the loss that town felt.
I'm sure. That sounds like
53 people?
Yeah. It's
or 52 people?
Whatever the size, just the number of names is clearly weighty.
Yeah. So I'm really sorry for the bummer of a story, but in some ways I thought it might be easier to retell something like this, as it was more or less like an accident, whereas other crimes are like the result of somebody being an asshole.
Yeah.
And therefore there's somewhere to place your outrage, like a specific person to put your outrage and grief on,
Harder in this case.
Yeah. But in this case, it's just one of those things that happen every once in a while that, that while they are really tragic and horrible, they tend to improve safety measures.
Yeah.
They improve those safety measures that are necessary to keep people safe. Just a little add-on to this episode.
Yeah.
We have a friend here who has a connection to this story in some way. So let's introduce our friend Ramon. Hi, Ramon.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
We love having guests.
Yeah.
Well, you're our first. So we talked about the story of Ortuella and the school and everything that happened there. So what was the connection that you had?
So the architect of the school was a family friend, lifelong family friend of my father's, especially. He was a very kind man, very good with kids. And he used to gift my father small books every year with poems he would write.
Okay.
We would all read them, or both my parents and myself. Very simple, very beautiful stuff.
Yeah.
And lifelong friends, a lot of affection between them. And when this happened, and it blew on the press.
Yeah.
Of course, he was distraught.
Yeah.
And then pressure started to happen. What I mean by this, back in the day, this was 83, if I recall correctly.
I think
1983.
Yeah.
1983, right? So back then, ETA, so they were very active and very influential and powerful at the time. So ETA was at an operational point where it felt strong and it felt safe because they could retreat beyond the French border and they would be safe there. The French authorities wouldn't intervene, so it was a safe haven for them. So they started thinking of what comes after the revolution, or whatever you want to call it, happens and it succeeds. And this was to begin to dabble in justice, in a way, deciding on matters other than the liberation fight, or whatever it is that you want
Freedom
to call
fighter,
it. Freedom
yeah.
fighting, yeah, exactly, freedom fighting. So they started making hits against drug dealers and
I remember
pressuring against the construction or the construction of the nuclear power station in Lemoyne.
Yeah.
And among other things, when issues of this sort came to the public light, they felt that they needed to make their presence felt and take action.
Right.
And the inevitable action, because they hardly knew anything else, was potentially killing or at least scaring the hell out of this man. So at the time, my father he wasn't politically active, he's never been, but he had connections and he knew this world fairly well and quite intimately, and especially not so much the people who were handling the guns. He never knew any of them, but he did know the original founders of what for 10 years had been ETA before it started killing, which was kind of a cultural association, defense of Basque culture and language and so on and so forth. And he knew them all, or he knew most of them.
Right.
And they were reasonably close. So eventually my father told me in rather ambiguous terms, no names, no nothing, that he had reached out to vouch for this man in the hopes that nothing would happen to him. And after some noises, eventually nothing actually happened to him.
Good. Wow.
But
nice.
It was there. It was a conversation that needed to
tense
take
moment.
place.
So there was a fear that they were going to attack the architect.
Yeah, potentially kill him or kidnapping him or just threaten him.
But because of the explosion? Or
because it was initially believed that it was an error in design or some corruption have happened in the construction of the place that could be blamed on the architect.
Yeah.
When in fact, much to the contrary, the architect opposed or wasn't never happy with the solution for the boiler.
Yeah.
And repeatedly sent messages that the configuration of the boiler and the building made it necessary to have extra maintenance done very often at quite a high expense. And of course, this didn't happen. But it would take some time for this to come to the light. So in the meantime, the man was blamed and made a bit of a
scapegoat.
Yeah. Well, an actual villain of some sort, like, the architect that's on the take and, and for his own profit has, caused this problem.
Pretty bad.
So there was a threat against his life with ETA.
So,
and your father vouched for him.
Exactly,
to say that he didn't have anything to do with this.
Exactly. So it is not even a given, A, that it's going to happen, or B, that your intervention is going to change anything.
Yeah.
Because it was often believed that the political apparatus of ETA had control over the armed bit of the organization, and that often was not the case.
Yeah.
So it could have been very well that you convinced a lot of them, and then nothing can be made to happen. Maybe orders have been given already,
or faction. I should say.
Somebody decides otherwise.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah, any kind of.
Oh wow.
Non-official system, right? It's all very hush-hush and different structures.
Yeah, he'll probably need... I personally would live the rest of my life wondering if somebody had been parked next to my house, just watching me, following my movements, in case they need to hit, That was probably the case.
Wow.
It's intense.
Well, thank you for that, Ramon.
Yeah. Did you? So, what age were you sort of when the 83? 1. You were one.
No, 4.
I was 4 years old. So the poems and everything that was afterwards, right?
Yeah. All through my childhood and teenage years. Yeah.
So they became, I guess. I mean, did the
more
architect?
Tight, probably,
did the architect know about this? Do you think? Or do you think?
I would think so. Yeah.
Right. Okay, that's nice. That's really nice.
Yeah, it probably would have been cryptically told in passing, like no importance.
Yeah.
But then the message would have been understood, and
that's
how
crazy.
it is over here.
Yeah. Like even when I came over to live, we still, which was about 18 years ago. Yeah, politics was still. I was talking about politics, but people were very shy. Still,
it was very, very often a matter of deciding whether you wanted to discuss politics or keep the friendship, or your relatives or whatever it was.
Right.
So most people obviously chose to not talk about it.
Yeah. Cool. Wow, that was a great story.
Yeah.
I hope it adds to the context of what was happening at the time.
For sure, it does. Yeah.
And like the way society was dealing with it in so many levels.
They were always there, hanging like a shadow,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
My pleasure.
So we love you. Thank you for listening. And
Take care.
yeah, you can follow us on our social media.
Send
You
in
can send us an email.
any mini
through,
crime times.
The crimes of the Basquelands at gmail.com. If you want to
Mhm.
send us any story ideas, any tenuous links to the Basque Country
Yep.
or Basque heritage. And yeah, follow us on Instagram. And if you want, give us a good review.
Please like, subscribe.
Yeah.
Lots of love for everybody.
Lots of love.
Agur.
We bid you agur.
That's the one.
Crimes of the Basque Lands is written and produced by
Douglas D. Carvalho.
Julie Garcia.
I'm Megan Dooley.
The sound and editing for each episode by
Douglas D. Carvalho.
I'm Megan Dooley.
Theme song written by
Douglas D. Carvalho.
Julie Garcia.
I'm Megan Dooley.
Sung by the choir with no name and produced by Tom Squires. Podcast art by Distinct Signal. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Crimes of the Basquelands and contact us at crimesofthebasquelands@gmail.com with story ideas worldwide which have a connection to the Basque Country or any rave reviews. If you like our podcast, please subscribe, like, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time,
Agur.